From SABC headquarters in Auckland Park, Johannesburg, good evening and welcome to this week's episode of Sunday Live. A rather shocking report emerged from Parliament this week. The Public Service Commission, whose job is to investigate, monitor and evaluate the work and achievements of the public service, made a presentation to Parliament on Wednesday. In the presentation, the Commission decried the growth in what it called comprador parasitic forms of wealth accumulation that currently plague the procurement of goods and services by the state. The Commission revealed that a staggering 1 billion rands, almost, was the amount of money exchanging hands between the government and senior officials working for the very same government, but also trading with the state. Here's how Director General of the Public Service Commission put it.
The value has gone up dramatically, from 130.6 million to almost a billion in 2010-11, 932.28 million. We're moving towards a billion.
Towards a billion. I don't know how much a billion can buy, but I'm sure lots of things. Well, the Commission's presentation also revealed how so much was going wrong in spite of the range, in fact, of integrity-promoting instruments and processes. The government has a number of progressive laws and policies. It also has a code of conduct. It has a financial disclosures framework. There are dedicated anti-corruption agencies. And there's whistleblowers protection, as well as an anti-corruption hotline. Now, if you look at the graphic that you're seeing on your screen, it says that in 76% of the cases of misconduct that the report looked at, 76% of them, no criminal action was taken whatsoever. In other words, these are the cases that are before the state and that the government knows about. The Public Service Commission also says that a ban, in other words, as a recommendation, a ban on public servants doing business with the state should, in fact, be considered. Now, do you think that will be the solution? In other words, should public servants be banned from doing government with business? Our SMS line is already open. The number is 34065. That number again, 34065. Our email, sundaylive@sabc.co.za. Our Facebook page, Sunday Live. Well, I'm joined, of course, here in the studio by Dave from Corruption Watch, who's going to discuss with us some of the ideas that as an agency, as a group and a pressure group that has been monitoring corruption in the country, whether in fact you think banning public servants would constitute a solution to that problem. Also joining us is Hassan Logat, who is a veteran anti-corruption activist as well, who used also to be with Transparency International. Dave, is that a solution?
I think it's a critical part of the solution. It might not be the total solution, but the data on the number of public servants that are also supplying goods and services to the very departments that they work for is staggering, and it should definitely not be allowed. It's amazing that it's taken so long to wake up to the fact that this is an absolute principal theatre of corruption, principal platform for corruption. So it may not be the total solution, but I definitely think it should be prohibited. I don't think public servants should be allowed to do remunerative work anywhere while they're public servants. Why should they be? But they should definitely not be allowed to do work in companies that do business with their own departments. There's no question about that in my mind.
Hassan?
Yeah, I think Dave's right, but I'll go further and say that even the politicians, those MPs in Parliament, themselves too must not have private work. Because if you're serving the public, really, you don't have too much time to serve another god. So clearly I think we're making a mistake there. But I also think we may lose the picture by just looking at these corrupt individuals. I think leadership from the top must actually set the example. We've set I mean, I actually find it quite boring. We had very good laws, we went for these forums, and whenever there's an international forum, the government wants to look good, and we sign on to it. But the act, the anti-corruption, the preventing and combating of anti-corruption, that act is a very powerful act, right? South Africa was one of the first ones to initiate it after the UN had a platform law, but it's not being implemented. I mean, yeah, when you look at the crimes that have been committed, yeah, it's actually increasing. You know, there's a whole lot of banning of individuals doing work with outside contractors has been an issue in the act. You know, the report also talks about people not being prosecuted when they're found guilty inside the workplace. So I think leadership is failing us.
So in other words, it's not for, in other words, we haven't run out of laws and policies to actually deal with corruption. Is it then a question, perhaps, Dave, of political willingness to then deal with this?
I think in significant part it is. Our laws are actually quite strong, quite robust, but they're not being enforced. There's data in this report about people who have been found to be involved in corrupt activities not being referred to the criminal authorities. I think it's against the law not to refer them to the criminal authorities. I mean, there's a section of the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act that compels people in authority to report those who they have found to be involved in corrupt activities to the police. So I think that those who don't report them should be prosecuted, actually.
Hassan, I mean, at some point you were part of the anti-corruption forum.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of government agencies and senior officials and people whose job it is to deal with corruption were serving in that structure. What is missing? In other words, what is preventing, I mean, people like the Department of Public Service and Administration, the Public Service Commission from actually doing, like, dealing with this? Because this problem has been with us since.
I think we have a real crisis in our society. I mean, I think Marikana is one example about the crisis of representation in some way. Our unions have to relook their role. Governments, politicians, everyone, we really have to take stock. But quite clearly, everywhere I go, and I work with poor communities now, they are very cynical about leadership, generally. They think when you're in power, you are a thief. We took a far shorter period. We took 18 years for people to get these opinions. Other parts of Africa took a couple of decades before the cynicism could set in. So clearly we have to discuss this. I sometimes thought when I took part in the NACF and various other fora, it was like a bit of a competition to make sure that the government comes out okay. You know, it's a good stuff on paper, and some of the NGOs dutifully try and get new laws in place. But I really, quite frankly, I think that we must take stock. None of these issues on their own work. We are lacking a very, very strong movement outside party politics to tackle these issues. Whether it's Malema's case or whether in Nkandla, all of them have a similar trend, that there's an abuse of power that people actually talk about on the street.
But how much of it has to do with perhaps the government shooting itself in the foot or scoring own goals? And the reason I'm asking this is because the Public Service Commission, which came out with this report, is not here today.
It's a shame.
To state their case, to give us insights into how they compiled the report, but also to really explain some of these things, because it's a comprehensive report and it's actually a very good report. But for some weird reasons, after quite a lot of prodding, they decided, no, they can't come and actually speak to the report. In other words, how much of that has to do, because the Nkandla case you're talking about, again, something similar happened, where when questions were asked, nobody from government came forward to actually give answers. So as a result, whatever people suspect is or are the reasons why the information is not being provided, that actually goes, because people have no other information to actually... The same here, when government would have been here, or an agency whose task it is to actually look at corruption, should have been here to actually say, this is why we think...
Vuyo, you know, I think it's a shame, it's a blot on our democracy that Richard Levine is not here. I mean, I've worked with him in other capacities, and I don't think it's in the individuals that we're talking about here. I think there's pressure placed on public servants not to do an honest day's work, right? Now, why is it that we had the public protector? In fact, our 1994 Constitution had, as part of the ANC's manifesto, we will have a public protector who will protect people. The first few years with, I think, Selby Batwa and then I think Lawrence Mshwana, they were kind of easy days. Then comes along a strong lady, right, who begins to act the role out. So part of the problem is we need to try and give backing to strong individuals. I mean, the same laws that apply to the public protector applies to Public Service Commission. They have to speak without fear or favor, right? And I really think it's a shame in any other country this will be discussed in Parliament. Not why they should not be here, but why did not come, you know? Yeah?
Well, I think if they weren't going to come, they shouldn't have produced this report. I mean, this report is now a matter of public record, and it stands, and it's an interesting report, and I think one that we could use to guide us and to wake us up and to inform better anti-corruption strategies going into the future. I'm really not sure why the Public Service Commission is not here to communicate these results to the South African public, because there's serious data here, and there's very interesting analysis and very interesting recommendations. And I hope it is not a sign that there is any doubt about the value and the validity of the major recommendations of this report, that government is not in fact represented at this discussion, because the reports, the recommendations are not rocket science. I mean, they're the very basic fundamentals of what you have to do to start tackling the problem.
But if you were to advise, just to finish this thought on the Public Service Commission and it not being here, if on the back of the report that they released on Wednesday, you were to advise them to take this story forward and perhaps to take the nation into confidence that we are either on the right track, or if we're not, then, I mean, that needs to be said as well. What would you have advised them on the back of that?
I would advise them to speak out loudly about this report, I mean, to the public and to people in the public service. I think there are a lot of people in the public service who are as worried about this as it would seem the authors of this report are, and as it is the public is. So I think they should be speaking out loudly about this report, and I think they should be implementing its major recommendations. I think there will be a lot of support for implementing its major recommendations, both in the public at large and in the public service, actually, because I think there are a very small number of individuals who are benefiting hugely from the laxity of these rules. So I don't think this will be an unpopular recommendation, really, and I think it should be enforced. But they have to get the support of the public to do something that will obviously be opposed by some quite powerful interests, and that's really that's why they should be on something like this. It shouldn't be Hussey and I, really. It should be the authors
Hassan,
of the
I mean,
report.
as a communicator yourself, what would we have done after Wednesday?
I mean, you know, when I say there's a crisis of our democracy, I mean, people are asking this, whether people represent us. The Public Service Commission went to Parliament, which is arguably the highest form of representation. After that, you can't go wrong. It's in the public domain. So why are they unhappy? Once it's in Parliament, if it had not gone to Parliament, we could understand. You know, it was discussed at COSATU or somewhere. It went to Parliament. So really, this must be taken up in itself. But when you look at 76% of them failed to institute criminal charges against, I mean, this is an indictment on us, really, really. And I really think the Commission of Police must be here. You guys must also broaden the cake. Why have they not? Because if 200,000, I think, is not reported as gone missing or not properly accounted for in this new act, there should be action. But they're not policing these acts. They're not funding it. They're not training people around it. So I'm wondering whether there's a commitment from the top.
Well, it's time to take a short ad break. Stay with Sunday Live. Welcome back. You're watching Sunday Live. Tonight we're discussing corruption in the public service. This after a report was tabled before Parliament on Wednesday detailing how public servants were trading with the government and in many instances sweeping it all under the carpet. What's your experience or what's your view? Our SMS line is 34065. That number again, 34065. Our email, sundaylive@sabc.co.za. And you can also post your comments on our Facebook page, Sunday Live. Now, I want us to talk about, there's somewhere where the Commission talks about the current situation. It says, systematic monitoring of corruption is poor. It says only 50% of the departments have databases on corruption. Most departments have not signed protocols with specialist agencies to assist with complex syndicated crimes that are happening there. Few departments comply with 100% filing of financial disclosures. Minimum anti-corruption capabilities are put in place, and there is insufficient resourcing at a personnel and budgetary level, which then begins to suggest that perhaps the laws and the regulation and everything that's put there is perhaps just so that someone can point to it and say, we do have it.
Tick box.
You know, tick the boxes. But beyond that point, really, nothing is happening.
I think that's right. I mean, if you look at the laws on the compliance with the financial disclosures regulations, you'll see that Limpopo, Mpumalanga, and I think it's the Northern Cape have the highest rate of compliance, and these are provinces where the level of corruption is notorious. So it's kind of clearly you've got to congratulate them on their financial disclosure, but you've also got to conclude that financial disclosure is not enough. There's no point in disclosing I have a financial interest in a certain transaction taking place and then being in a position where you can actually influence the fact that that transaction does take place. The point is that you can't be on both sides of a transaction, and declaring that you are doesn't make it okay. So it's about law, and it's about the spirit of the law, and it's about being seen and being perceived to obey the spirit of the law. That is really lacking. So yes, we have a lot of good laws, but we also need to have a lot of good compliance with the law, and we need to have compliance not only with the letter of the law, but also with the spirit of what the law is saying.
I mean, interesting point there, Hassan. I mean, if you look at the compliance rate, I mean, Western Cape 100%, but as Dave was saying, provinces like Limpopo from 89% in 2011 to 96% in 2011-2012. Yet, I mean, so many departments are under administration there. I mean, we know what happened around
I'm sure a
textbooks.
consultant has done the report.
Now, how do you explain that part of the report?
Quite clearly, I think people know how to play the game so that we look right, we sound like we're doing the right thing. But fundamentally, like tenders as well, why are we talking about tenderpreneurs? Objectively, there's a panel sitting there, someone evaluated, it's neutral, it's independent from other people, but clearly we know who gets the tenders. So quite clearly, the systems, people are playing the system. They don't believe in the system, they are playing it.
I mean, look, if you look at the next page about, the financial disclosures, which also presents a rather interesting picture, because the Department of Cooperative Governance, for example, has got 157 senior managers. With 31% of them, there's potential for conflict of interest. With 24% of them, there's a correlation between official responsibilities and the private company that they belong to. 20% of them have so many companies. I mean,
the other part is that we should be discussing the private companies, that the corruptor and corruptee. For every public servant, there's a hand outside playing this game. Bogus company, real company. So clearly, we need an efficient and effective police, and investigating units, everything else must work. But as you've seen, those who blow the whistle either get shot, as in Mpumalanga before the World Cup. So clearly, there's pressure on those who try to do good work. Those who try to be honest, not part of the take, get pressurized. So Dave, this is the part where social movements, where the unions and others have to play a role. Sometimes the union system is also corrupted, where shop stewards and others are involved because they have close contacts with a former comrade who's now in positions of power. So clearly, it's a messy business.
But I mean, what is being reported here are circumstances in which people who are in senior positions and procurement positions in the public sector are effectively setting up companies outside of the public sector in order to do business with their own department, with themselves, effectively. And there is no way that this is sustainable. I mean, it's remarkable that this is not against the law, and it's been one of the most strenuous demands that have been made since the Anti-Corruption Forum was set up. I mean, what this encourages is an interesting practice called javelin throwing, where you're sitting in the public sector and you throw out your javelin to where you want it to hit, and then you engage with where the target of your javelin is.
One minister not too long ago was saying it's no more the javelin even, because the javelin has to go a bit too far. It's a discus. People like throw
shot put
quickly
yes,
pick up. In fact, right now. Now, I want you to look at the among the measures is obviously the hotline.
Yeah.
Now, if you look at the successes of the hotline, total of 1,504 officials were dismissed from the public service. 16 were demoted. 341 were given final written warnings. 202 were prosecuted. The recovery of 300 million from the perpetrators by various departments. The question is, should we be celebrating? In other words, should we be saying, as much as we are critical of the state of affairs and the fact that the government isn't as serious as it should be, but there are some successes. But are these worth celebrating?
I don't think that these are inconsequential numbers at all. And I think that they do represent the fact that there are people, and I don't doubt the people at the head of the Public Service Commission are amongst them, who are interested in, really intent on combating this. I'm a little bit more disturbed about the figures that say that people who have been found guilty of corruption, firstly, are on suspension for ages and ages and ages, and they can't, and being paid. And secondly, that they're not being reported to the criminal justice authorities. Because I think, as I said before, I think it's an offence not to report people under the Act. It's an offence not to report people who you have reason to believe have been guilty of corruption. So I really don't understand that figure, and I don't understand why they are not prosecuting not only those people who are guilty of corruption, but those people who have not reported those who they have reason to believe are guilty of corruption.
But is it a good enough explanation? Here's one explanation here from the report, is that a lack of investigative capacity by the departments that do not have appropriate structures or specialized units to deal with these cases.
I mean, we talk about
explain.
It doesn't, but we're talking about one intervention. The hotline is one intervention. I mean, what's happened to the asset forfeiture unit? What happened to SIU? There's a whole lot of things, some special units. So quite clearly, we look like we're reinventing the wheel. Sometimes Willie Hoffmeyer is here, then he's moved away. So people lose confidence. They're not sure whether they can trust the institution and whether the institution is protected from political interference. So I think that, as Dave says, that is one intervention. But maybe, I think Corruption Watch, Dave, you guys, if Public Service Commission gives you all that information, you guys can go to the police tomorrow in terms of this act, no?
Our model is to, I suppose, provide a platform on which people can speak about and recount their experiences of corruption, and I think it's important that people use it. Just as I think it's important that people report to the anti-corruption hotline, but they have to see consequences from it. And while as I say, I don't think that these figures are inconsequential, and I think that they do evidence the fact that some people and some institutions in government are taking this very seriously. If they want people to report, they have to do that. They have to show more success and more commitment to pursuing the reports that they're getting.
It's time to take another short ad break. Do stay with us. Welcome back. We're looking at public servants doing business with the state and asking the question whether, in fact, as per the recommendations of the Public Service Commission, it's a practice that should be done away. In other words, should the state bar public servants, senior public servants especially, who actually take decisions on these matters, should they be barred or banned from doing business with the state? Isn't that, in fact, contributing to the scourge of corruption that we are seeing in this country? Now, I want us to take this a step further, because if you look at the report talks to the PFMA, the Treasury regulations, the anti-corruption hotline, and all these measures that are put in place. And then it says, read together, they should be, they are actually unambiguous about how the state is or should feel about corruption. But I also want to say that if you read what is coming out of this report, together with the Auditor General's recent report, then again you start seeing, that actually the problem is a lot bigger because there's issues of compliance. And if you picked up a newspaper today, you will have seen in Gauteng alone, SCOPA, the Public Accounts Committee of the legislature, was dealing with several departments that are not complying, including the Office of the Premier. Now, I want us to go back to one show we did recently, where on the back of the Auditor General report, we had a show, and this is the insert that we played you on that day.
We don't believe it's tenable. And that's why we are actually proposing that public servants, particularly SMS members and officials in supply chain management, should be prohibited from doing business with government.
Okay, that's the recommendation, of course, of the Director General of the Public Service Commission, Richard Levin, saying a recommendation is that it must stop right now. Government, public servants should stop doing business with the government, in the hope that this is going to address the problem once and for all. But let's say it does, given, let's say that recommendation carries, given what we said right at the beginning, that in fact, even though you have all these regulations and laws, it still isn't happening. Is that necessarily?
We don't need one. There's not one silver bullet or one intervention. I really think that the public protector is a good example. People make a difference. They can take bad institutions. The case of trade unions, when Dave and them were in the General Workers' Union and others, showed that there was bad law, but good people trying to use bad law to build a strong people's movement. Similarly, I wonder, it's 18 years and now people seem to have lost the vision that they're there to serve our people. And the public servants are supposed to be our first line of defense against corruption, protecting people, and really we need them to work for people. Otherwise, they join the camp of against the people camp.
Okay. But I think it would be a very important step forward. Very, very important step forward.
But not necessarily.
It's not the end of it. It's not the end of the matter. And corruption is very difficult to eliminate from any society. But this is an open agenda, an open opportunity for corruption, and I think it should be closed. So I think it would be a very, very important step forward.
Okay, let's go back. I believe that insert is ready.
Eminyakeni emibili edlule, ihhovisi lika Auditor General belijabulele isimo sokusetshenziswa kwezimali nesabe sivumela ukuhlangabezana nokuqhubekela phambili kwezibopho kanye nokuthuthukisa ukukhokhwa kwezikweletu. Ngokocwaningo lwesingeniso sezimali kwangonyaka ka-2010 kanye no-2011 lubonisa ukunyuka ngo-1.85 billion wamarandi uma kuqhathaniswa nesabelo esingu-1.836 billion wamarandi. Ngokwemibono eyahlukene, lokhu kubonakala kuyinselelo kanti kuningi okumele kwenziwe ukuhlela iminyango kahulumeni kanye neyemiphakathi ukuze kufinyelelwe ekuphuculeni ucwaningo mabhuku oluhlanzekile. Izindaba ezimbi ngempela yilezi zika 22.445 billion wamarandi olungazange lugunyazwe nolube nezihibe nemiphumela emibi kanye nokusetshenziswa budedengu nokungathulanga uphenyo. Isamba esingu 2.3 billion wamarandi seminyaka edlule senyukile uma kuqhathaniswa nonyaka wezimali odlule. Imbangela lolucwaningo lwezimali ukubhekisisa imali yomphakathi nokuthi isetshenziswa kanjani. Imiphumela yocwaningo lwezimali lweminyaka emithathu edlule ngokwezifundazwe luyehlukahlukana. Uhulumeni waseMpumalanga Koloni, Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, Limpopo kanye neNtshonalanga Koloni, imiphumela yocwaningo lokusetshenziswa kwezimali zomphakathi yenyukile. Kanti olwezifundazwe iFree State kanye neMpumalanga lwehlile. Izifundazwe iNyakatho Koloni kanye neNorthwest lusemindawonye. Usihlalo wekomiti elibhekele izindlela zokusetshenziswa kwezimali zabakhokhintela njengezingqapheli zomphakathi uThemba Godi uphakamisa ukukhathazeka ngokuthi enye yezimali isetshenziswa ngezindlela ezingafanele.
In most instances you find that the supply chain, policies are not being followed. And that leads to irregular expenditure, and in uncontrolled instances it leads to unauthorized expenditure.
Ngokusho komcwaningi mabhuku wezimali uthi kuyacaca ukuthi iningi lezifundazwe kumele libhekele ikakhulukazi ezezimali nokusebenza kwabaphathi kanye nohulumeni ukuze bakwazi ukufinyelela ezingeni lokuphatha elingenazo izihibe.
The fight against corruption, against mismanagement cannot be left to the corridors of parliament. It's a national responsibility. We need an active citizenry to partake in saying no to corruption and in insisting that services that they get from government do not have to be paid for. There have to be no bribes, and due processes have to be followed. There should be no cutting of corners. In that way, it will be more cost effective than when it's done otherwise.
Iskopa inenkolelo yokuthi umphakathi ungadlala indima enkulu ngokusiza uhulumeni ukuze ugcine imali. Nakuba imiphumela yocwaningo luka 2010 no 2011 lweminyango yezifundazwe kanye nemiphakathi lubonisa intuthuko exubile ezinzile kanye nokuhlehlela emuva ngezindlela abaholi bakuzwelonke nabezifundazwe abazibekele lona. Kepha umbuzo osemi othi kungabe yini engenziwa ukuze kuqedwe ukuchithwa kwezimali ezinkulu kangaka nguhulumeni? Zanele Qwabe, Sunday Live.
Well, it then brings another dimension to this, because on the one hand, you're dealing with reporting on financial misconduct going up. I mean, it says here, over the years, there's been a steady increase with senior managers engaged in financial misconduct. And then on the other, there's a great deal of laxity. I mean, over spending for 22 billion across the board, 26 billion that has been wasted. It's almost looks like people are deliberately not complying, perhaps because they want to do the things that they are doing and sweeping under the carpet. Or is that too much reading into it?
Well, I think that a disturbing part of this report is the report that says that the numbers are going down, the numbers of reported cases are going down, which I find a little implausible if that's meant to represent the number of cases that are occurring. But what is clear is that the value is going up, and the seniority of the people involved in this huge irreconcilable interest conflict where you do effectively business with your own department is going up as well. And so I think the problem is becoming more serious. When it may be containable when it's a low-level member of the department providing low-level services from a private sector company to the department. I don't think that's condonable. But when it's a deputy director general or a chief director who is involved in a company that is providing core services to the department, often worth hundreds of millions of rands, there is no way that that can be allowed to continue and for one to expect corruption to be contained. Those two things are just mutually exclusive. So there are a lot of concerning things about this report, but I think it's pleasing that the report has been brought out. And I hope to hear the Public Sector Commission elaborating on this report in the future, because it's an important guide for us.
Exactly what we would have wanted. I want to touch on an issue of discipline, because the report touches on it, and I'm not sure just how far it takes. Because the report notes that discipline is not managed effectively due to inadequate capacity to chair disciplinary hearings and represent departments.
Now, I've been a unionist and I've represented workers. I think what's happening now, if a manager does not like someone or someone is an obstacle, either they're doing good work, they use the formal processes to get them out. But bad people are protected in the system.
A form of harassment.
Yeah, so I really think this is what's happening. I really come back to your issue, the systematic underperformance. Unlike somewhere like the mining law, the regulated bodies in the mining sector, where I think are systemically weakened. Yeah, there's a good law, and good institutions, But I think the missing ingredient is good people to make sure that the public can be served, and that's a mistake, I think.
Time to take another short ad break. Do stay with us. After the break, we'll look at some of the comments that you've posted on this matter. Welcome back. We're looking at whether public servants should be allowed to trade with the state given the influential positions that they hold, but also that they know exactly what the state requires and are therefore colluding, as some of the suggestions go, with other people, including those in the private sector, to actually rob the state of much needed money that should be going to social service delivery and other areas. A point you raised earlier, takes two to tango.
But this is not only a case of them colluding with people in the private sector. That often happens. This is a case with them being in the private sector at the same time as they're in the public sector. I mean, to me, that's a no-brainer. The colluding with people in the private sector happens a lot, and that's a matter for policing work and for detection. But where you are allowed to be both in the public sector and the private sector at the same time is an invitation to corruption and to favouring the company that you own in the private sector. And it should not be allowed. It should be the first rule. It should be like, when your wickets get hit, you're out. This is the first rule in order to combat corruption, and it should be implemented without hesitation.
But if we go back a few years, Hassan, where did we drop the ball on this one? In other words, given everything that was happening, the laws that were being formulated, the strengthening of the various offices, the disciplinary laws, rules and regulations, where did we drop the ball on this one? How did it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm embarrassed to say that when I used to do work in the region, Africa-wide, we used to be very proud that we were not talking like it's our turn to chow. But I really think people are talking about it. It's our turn to eat. And now people are even talking about it. It's this administration or that administration. I wonder why this particular law has not been implemented effectively, because the thing, Dave, you talk about here, there are crimes specifically applying to the public sector doing private work. All the things we're talking about here is in this Preventing and Combating of Corrupt Act. So it's there. So I really think we must go back to this, that yes, we must ban senior politicians doing business with themselves, pretending to be private companies, but we must extend it, I say this, to parliamentarians as well, because they're there to serve the public. So extend it to MPs. We don't need another investigation. We've seen all those other things. The third thing is that if the Public Service Commission are not going to be investigating or following up on why the people who've been doing corrupt business inside the public sector are not prosecuted, the 76%, if they're not going to follow it, then I think it's an open season for the public protector to step in, because she can only investigate if someone else is not doing it. So really, this is a public challenge for her to do it.
Now, one of our viewers says it's because a lot of these public servants are paid peanuts.
It's
not
not
the
true.
top ones.
It's not true. At the level of seniority that is being spoken about here, these are not
Among
people
the
who are
best paid
underpaid.
people in the country,
No,
or
I mean,
highest.
they're well paid people.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. I mean, I think there's no justification for anybody to be corrupt. But if you're asking for financial hardship as a justification, then these are not people who are suffering financial hardship. I mean, I worked in one of these positions in the public service. It's well remunerated.
They're earning more than the 50% of the people who are not working.
Yeah.
And when they steal, they deprive others from doing it. So that's the issue. And
But then when you, to someone who sits at home or says, I mean, you can maybe share with us some of your experiences. Having worked, is there an incentive for a senior public servant to care? Now, there's apart from a moral, if you like, obligation, for argument's sake, is there an incentive for a senior public servant to want to do something?
Yeah, I think that there is, and I think that most of them follow that incentive. I'm not one who believes that everybody in the public service is corrupt, or every public service institution is riddled with corruption. I think for the most part, they're people who want to do the right thing. I worked there, and those were the people that I overwhelmingly dealt with. I think this is a question of applying a rule. In fact, it is not against the law, certainly in most second and third tier level of governments, for public servants to have private business interests and to do business with those private sector interests on behalf of their departments. It should be made against the law. And so then you impose that rule, and hopefully you enforce it better than they're enforced at the moment. But you should at the very least make it contrary to the law to be involved in a private company that is providing goods and services to the company, to the department of which you are a senior official. It should be the minimum, the absolute minimum.
But what about, because there are a lot of people who talk about how certain categories of public servants actually stay at middle management level. In other words, these are not now your seniors, but they are not your juniors either. Mid-level public servants who don't want any promotion, because where they are actually in charge of these processes, and those are perhaps the most dangerous. That's the most dangerous group, because while we're looking up there at senior public servants who take all the decisions and who run the departments or the units within the various departments, actually, this how much?
But they don't work alone. It's impossible for that middle layer to do it on their own. They need people on the top to nod or to give some kind of agreement. So really, the system is becoming bad. So as we said, yes, go for the guys, the top guys, ban them. I say go to the MPs as well, because they've got to serve us, and then prosecute those who have done wrong now. That will show it. If we don't prosecute, Dave, then we can introduce nothing.
No, I think it's right, but it's also the argument that you make is all the more reason for why this dual role of private sector and public sector should be prohibited. I mean, if there are smart people in the middle ranks of the public service who have no incentive to ascend up the ranks of the public service because it's more financially lucrative to remain in the middle ends, we are losing in every possible way. And so the answer is to prohibit it and to enforce that prohibition. Because as both Hassan and I have said, these are not people who are earning poorly. They're comfortable. They're comfortably paid, and that should be good enough.
And the reason why they should do the right thing, politicians and others, the public service is the only one that can unite the people. When there's a quality public service that all of us use, the president, the sweeper, the COSATU official, everyone, all of us, the quality will go up. So it unifies us, but it must be of higher quality. And if they do these things, they take away that potential to make it of higher quality.
Okay. It's time to take another short break. Stay with Sunday Live. Welcome back. You're watching Sunday Live. Dave, now you head up a corruption watch. Yeah. Someone who's staying at home who says, today I've decided I've got to get involved for the sake of my country and of our future. This has got to an end. Where do we begin now as civil society to start putting pressure?
Well, for us it's to ask those people to report experiences of corruption to us, knowledge of corruption to us, to exchange opinions with the public who are reporting to us about how these things could be countered. Our website is very active, our Facebook page is very active, our Twitter account is very active, our telephones are quite active, our short code SMS is quite active. And in a democracy, the way people overcome their problems is by participating. That's what a democracy is about. It's a system of governance that allows people to participate. And so we think that the only way of really consolidating the anger and the outrage that there is about corruption is if you have a demanding, active citizenry that holds those who have access to public resources, whether they're in the private sector or the public sector, to account for the way in which they use those resources. And, you know, we investigate them. We've just had some very successful initiatives with the City of Johannesburg, who have agreed to implement many of the recommendations we've made in relation to the Metro Cops. So we really want people to report to us and to engage in this campaign against corruption.
Now, obviously, not everybody wants to be sort of as active, as in be there every day as part of an organization like Corruption Watch's programs. But what's the least that a person can do to support the cause?
It's very easy. I know that not everybody has access to the internet. For those who do have access to the internet, it's very easy. But even those who have access to cell phones, we have a short code SMS which people are reporting to us on. In the 9 or 10 months of our existence, we've had about 3,000 reports. We're going to campaign very actively in the next 5 months for people to report more. And we take these voices and we collectivize them and we amplify them and we tell the authorities that you have a problem because a lot of people are speaking about this problem.
Now, I mean, Hassan, the other point that the report makes is that with so much high unemployment and a lot of people not getting sort of decent jobs or being unable to like crack it, you know, there is a level at which civil society becomes complicit. In other words, while this senior manager sits at the office, someone is doing the legwork for them. Someone is conspiring with somebody else to actually make this work for that senior public servant, even if it's for a pittance, really. But how do we deal then with that part of the problem?
No, I think there must be, these small interventions, as we pointed out, are important, but it must also be an encompassing vision, something that's worth fighting for and believing in. And I think we're losing that. You know, in some way people are afraid to fight for a higher order because somehow we are all fighting for scrums, you know. Last week, Dave, since you made this great intervention with Joburg Metro, a group of 5 of them in the police in the Metro vehicle took a person to the ATM to take off money. And I had to advise the person to take it off the Facebook because, you know, if you're not going to act on this issue, they're going to come back after you. So there's a certain sense where people want to do the right thing, but they need this help. And it doesn't only come from below. We need some good people up there in the political parties and all the movements to show us it is possible. They want this higher order. Unfortunately, we seem to be in a very mediocre space at present.
Well, the report talks about building leadership that is exemplary, oriented towards the public interest, inspirational, authoritative, and innovative. The solutions are there. This is, I mean, of all the things we've said and everything that, I mean, we've said here, I mean, this evening, this report details all the problems. It details what is there but is not working and why it is not working and how it can be made to work. But sadly, not only are people who have all these insights not here to give us more insights or to really explain to South Africa what is contained in here. Now, which then, in the end, doesn't really give hope that beyond what the three of us were talking about this evening. Well, the report gives hope.
You take your gains where you can get them. So you've got the report now. It's a matter of public record. I don't know why the Public Service Commission are not defending and, in fact, promoting what they have put on the public record. But we will, and we will make sure that this report gets heard and gets publicised and that people respond to it. And I think it would be great to be led by them in doing so. And I'm pretty sure that those who have put this report on the table, that it's a representation of the concern that they feel.
I'd love to be led by them because I think this was an excellent piece of work. Your closing comments?
Is what you have here is the Bible without the prophets. You know, so I really think that that we need to rebuild some community here, to rebuild community, because I think justice and equality gets compromised by these dastardly acts. So we need to really work harder.
Thanks very much.
Thank you,
Dave, Hassan. Thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thanks,
well, that's all we had time for this evening. Thanks for watching and do enjoy what's left of your weekend. Good night.